Hello everyone, and welcome to today's IAPC&M CPD Building Masterclass. So my name is Julie Kennedy, dialing in from the Netherlands, and I'm your host. So we have a great topic today, acceptance and commitment coaching, brought to us by guest speaker, accredited coach and counselor Stephen Hopkins, who also, little did you know, was a percussionist in the National Youth Orchestra. Now that's something I certainly didn't know about you. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. As always, our call today will be a maximum of 1 hour, and that includes 15 minutes Q&A, which we will take at the end. But feel free to use the box to write down any of your comments or questions in case you forget them before the end. Now, the session is recorded, so please mute yourself. But it would be great if you could keep your video on. Needless to say, I hope you have your pens and your CPD pads ready to take copious notes so we can put all of this into practice afterwards. And without further ado, on to you, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely to be with you this afternoon, and lovely to be given this opportunity to talk about something which is something I came across about 4 years ago, actually, and which has sort of become very important to me, and which has changed my practice as a coach and as a counselor significantly. So I'm going to be talking about something called acceptance and commitment coaching. It's going to be about 45 minutes. We'll do questions at the end, and there's an opportunity at the end to do some more, I guess, but more about that in a minute later on. Okay, so this is what we advertised this as. It was the two big nuggets for today are for you to take away an understanding of the rudiments of acceptance and commitment coaching model, which is what I will do, and for you to gain some insights into how this can be incorporated into and integrated with other coaching approaches. Now, I'm clearly not going to do that bit. I'm going to be, I suppose, giving some indications about how I use it. But the second one of those nuggets is the nugget you're going to have to mine for yourself, in the sense that it's going to be you thinking about how you work, who you work with, and if there's anything here in terms of these rudiments of acceptance and commitment coaching that you can take and move into the way in which you work. Okay, so that's as we began. Whoa. Okay. The first thing that we need to look at clearly is, what is acceptance and commitment coaching? And in order to arrive at the answer, I need to first of all talk about a concept of psychological flexibility. I then need to talk about acceptance and commitment therapy, because that's the base from which acceptance and commitment coaching grew. Yeah, so we'll arrive at what is acceptance and commitment coaching through that journey. So the underpinning concept really for acceptance and commitment coaching is the notion of psychological flexibility. We are all, to differing extents, have different degrees of psychological flexibility. It's our capacity to be in the contact with the present moment, and our capacity to be aware of thoughts and emotions without trying to change them or being adversely controlled by them, but just be aware of them and know of them, and have that relationship with them, which isn't the sort of tsunami of thoughts and emotions that many people experience. It's to do those two things, but it's also at the same time to be acting, to be working, to be pursuing the pursuits that align with our values. So if we're very psychologically flexible, we can actually work with the grain of the pursuit of things to do with our values without being totally washed over. I use the term tsunami, with thoughts and emotions which are trying to sort of get in the way of that. There's lots and lots of research that shows that psychological flexibility is related to lower psychopathology measures and higher levels of quality of life. So it's something for us all to strive towards, and something to help, something that it's good for us to get a a degree of self-awareness around. What is acceptance and commitment therapy? It's a therapy developed to help people increase their psychological flexibility. Yeah. So somebody comes to a therapy session. I know this is about coaching. We'll get onto that in a minute. But somebody comes to a counseling, a therapy session, wants some help with a particular thing that's troubling them, that by working on their psychological flexibility, that can help them very, very significantly. It's called a transdiagnostic psychotherapy because it can be used for all sorts of things. Yeah. So people can come presenting any of those things there and more. But the therapeutic approach, which is to work on their psychological flexibility, has been shown to help with all of those and more. So it's got a very, very wide range and wide scope in terms of its value. Lots and lots of randomized control trials, and some of you will know that's the sort of that's the platinum standard in terms of empirical validation of the effectiveness of an approach. Loads and loads and loads of them, and you can get a sense here from nothing or virtually little to thousands, and it's rapidly expanded. So you get a sense from that of how relatively new this approach of working on to help people with their psychological flexibility is, and how it's got a very strong randomized control trial type empirical underpinning. So really, really well validated. So what is acceptance and commitment coaching? Well, it draws on the work of the acceptance and commitment therapy. So it takes it from a more therapeutic area to the areas we're used to working in, which is more sort of coaching areas. It's based on the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy. It's got clear theoretical underpinning. And one of the things that it works on is that link between language, thinking, and human behavior. And I particularly like this last sentence: acceptance and commitment coaching is based on the assumption that coaching is not broken, but simply struggling, I love this, with the way humans tend to respond to the language machine of the mind. And do you know, that's what we do all the time in coaching, isn't it? We're working with the language machine of the mind, yeah, and helping the people we work with to understand there is a language machine of the mind. It isn't us, it isn't our essence, it isn't our authenticity. It's the language, the machine of the mind. And you know what? It sometimes gets in the way, and it sometimes thwarts and sabotages what we really want to be doing and working within our values. It's based on the assumption that we've got a set of core values and principles and purposes, which get lost in all those swirling thoughts and feelings and judgments, which the language machine of the mind creates for us. It creates overwhelming feelings, unbearable feelings sometimes, and it drives us off track. And we no longer work with the grain of what we want to be doing and what's right for us in terms of our values, but we go with the language machine of the mind and the stuff that's in that machine and that machine is processing. So it's appropriate, therefore, just to have a little look at language. This will just remind us, because as coaches, we know all about language. There's a great upside in language. Do you know? We all know about that. It allows us to learn very, very quickly. Without direct experience, we can learn something using language. We don't have to directly experience it. We can derive relationships between things, how one thing relates to another, without being explicitly taught. The language sort of points in the directions of that for us. And we use words to classify and describe and take on some of the functions of the things we're describing. So the language sort of goes beyond the beyond the actual object, if you like, and the experience. So it's a great help for our cognitive functioning and our problem solving fundamentally, and our survival. But there's a painful downside. The language can take on and generate painful emotions because of meanings we attach to words. Yeah, and the words remain and the emotions hang about with them. And what we do as human beings is we move away from painful thoughts and feelings and memories in the same way as we do any external stimuli. And we create, using language, some rigid rules for ourselves. I can't do this because I should. We become governed by language rules that somehow we acquire and that can dominate us and can prevent us from being psychologically flexible. Because if we're bound by lots of shoulds and musts, it stops us being psychologically flexible. So working with those and trying to identify and unpick those and increase the psychological flexibility is helpful. And it interrupts our known as context sensitivity. So we respond to language and not what's happening in the present. Yeah, so we lose contact with the present moment because our language takes us into the past, back to the past, and it takes us beyond the present and into the future. So there's a downside to language, which creates that sort of machine of the mind, which hugely gets in the way, and for some people is hugely painful and hugely difficult. So what I'm going to do is present to you the theoretical underpinning for coaches to understand the mechanisms that occur in relation to language and thinking influence human behavior and that machine of the mind. But I find, and I've put in there in bold next to the word coaches and coachees, because I find, I love that quote there. It isn't that they can't see the solutions, they can't see the problem. It helps, I've found it helps people I'm working with, people I'm coaching, to sort of understand the problem a bit, to sort of understand what might be going on that they can begin to work on and work with me on. So I've added and coaches because I think it helps there too. So what is the underpinning framework? What is this acceptance and commitment therapy move to coaching framework? And there's the framework. And if you wish to follow up any of this thing about acceptance and commitment, coaching, therapy, counseling, whatever, you'll see the term hexaflex used a lot. The guy who conceptualized this right at the very beginning coined this the hexaflex. Basically 6 different elements that actually we need to work with the people we're working with on in order to increase their psychological flexibility. We look at something called diffusion, something called acceptance, something called present moment awareness, values, committed action, and called self as context really means the observing self, helping people we're working with, our clients, to separate the thinking mind from the observing mind. The thinking mind can get involved in all sorts of stuff that isn't essentially our authentic self or observing self. So they are the 6 different elements. I'm just going to talk you through in different ways those different elements. Sometimes the model is of 6 is represented like that, which I quite like as well, because the 6 elements are sort of grouped in 3 groups. And so therefore the concept of psychological flexibility is about awareness, opening up awareness of the present moment, of ourselves as being an observing self, as being the context for all of this. It's about being open. It's about accepting things, and it's about not being diffusion is essentially to actually decouple ourselves from some of our more painful thoughts and thoughts that are getting in the way. So being more open. And the third element is being active, which is committing to values, committing to action, sorry, that are underpinned by values. So that's just another way of looking at what this psychological flexibility is. And there's another representation, and that puts some flesh on the bones. So being present, focusing on the moment, and being in the now. Values, discovering what's important to you and what you want and what you stand for. Commitment, taking action to pursue the important things in your life. Self for context, the observing self, to be aware of your thoughts, your moods, your behaviors, not letting them just sweep over you without having an awareness of them. Diffusion, learning to step back and detach from unhelpful thoughts, worries, and memories. An acceptance, to be open to making room for painful feelings and sensations, not trying to fight them, but to see what they are, to work with them, to self-manage them, rather than being totally swept in tsunami fashion over by them. So on the basis that people can have these slides and use these to work with going forward, that's another representation of those 6 different parts of the underpinning model. So when I'm coaching somebody, I wouldn't say I'm coaching you using acceptance and commitment model. I would be thinking, if this person and what they're coming to me for support with, where some of these elements might be things that I can actually work with them on. Yeah, I can think of a particular chap called Andrew, a businessman called Andrew, who was very entangled with stuff that he was trying to deal with about what success meant. And he was measuring his success by stuff that he'd got from his childhood about how to measure success. And without going into detail, it was getting hugely in the way in terms of him and his business. And we did a lot of work in that area. But to do that, we had to talk about being in the present moment quite a bit, because the whole mindfulness thing really was something that we needed to have a look at. And we did quite a lot of work on his values. What were really important things to him in his life, and how was he going to pursue those important things, and accept that there was some struggles around what success meant, but not fight them, and not be over worried about them, but just keep working on them. Yeah. So it's not a model which says you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. It's a model which says here are elements. And if you suspect the person you're working with is not very psychologically flexible, and it's getting in the way, they're getting in their own way because of that, these are things you can work on. I have a sort of an assessment sheet that I'm going to go through bits of it in a moment. Let's just go back, which looks like that. And sometimes judging, I judge the person I'm working on. I talk about the model, and I ask them to go away and rate themselves on each of those 6 scales. So let's have a look at the acceptance one. I constantly struggle with my thoughts and feelings. 10. I willingly accept my thoughts and feelings even when I don't like them. 1. So where would you rate yourself? Yeah. So they go away and they come back with that. And then we talk about that. And we find through their self-assessment the particular areas it may be very well useful to start working on. Yeah. Other times I'm using that, and in conversation, I'm getting a sense from them of where I'm judging they are. I use it differently with different people. So this is just bringing the scale, that model, highlighting it. So acceptance is constantly struggling with thoughts and feelings, psychologically flexible, and willing to accept my thoughts and feelings even if I don't like them. Diffusion, my thoughts tell me how things really are and determine what I do next, rather than the more flexible approach. I see each of my thoughts as just one of many ways to think about things, and what I do is up to me. That's more psychologically flexible. Self-observer, deep down, my thoughts and feelings are the real me. More psychologically flexible, my thoughts and feelings come and go, but deep down, the real me doesn't change. So where is the person in there? Have they even thought any of those thoughts before? Yeah. Commitment to taking action. I don't manage to act in the things I care about. I work out what I need to do about the things I care about and see them through. Yeah. So I think you can see from that oh, it's a way in. It's a way in to, and this is available for people if they want it. It's a way in to actually focusing down on those aspects of that model, those aspects of psychological flexibility that are useful. Here's the values one. I don't know what I want from life. I'm clear what I choose to value in my life. I've known somebody, a young lady called Sarah, who all of the coaching became about that. Because having looked at the whole thing, that was she really exposed that for herself, that she just hadn't got any sense of what she wanted from life or what about. So her presenting things when she came into the coaching sort of moved aside because actually this was far more important to her. Yeah. And the last one is attention to the present. I spend most of my time lost in thoughts about the past and the future, and I spend most of my time paying attention to the present moment. Yeah. Now you can see wherever a person's rating themselves on there might be a huge amount of work to be done there. So it opens up all sorts of possibilities in terms of working as a coach with the person you're working with. Okay. Similar concept now presented in a slightly different way. It can be said that all of us at any one time are either working and moving towards what we want, towards the direction of travel we're moving in, or we're moving away. The other scale I've got here is what we see and present to others externally. That's on the outside, our behaviors that are observable by others are on the outside. So that's above the line. The stuff that's going on privately within us that isn't necessarily exposed to others is stuff on the inside. Okay, so as I go through this, you'll see the relationship between this and what we've just been talking about. I often use this as a way of applying this acceptance and commitment coaching, model in my coaching. So down here, we've got who and what is important to you. That's the values, isn't it? Here, we've got difficult stuff that gets in the way. Here, we've got what I do when this stuff shows up. And here I've got what we could see if you were moving towards what matters. So the whole model looks like that. It's got 5 of the elements of the Hexaflex model in it. Self as context, of course, is the one in the middle because you're aware of where you are. And the present moment stuff sort of wraps around the whole thing. Okay. So we can talk about James, a guy I coached with a lot of difficult stuff that was getting in the way of him doing what was important to him. And he had a view that he had to sort everything out in terms of the difficult stuff that was getting in the way before he could do anything that was important to him. So we decided that wasn't a good approach, that we needed to work in different areas. Okay. So one of the things that was getting in some of the stuff that was getting in the way was about his own feelings of a bit of worthlessness, a bit of feeling that he wasn't being valued by people, and he was sort of hiding himself away, really, not really engaging socially with people in the workplace where he was offered opportunities. He was hiding himself away. He was trying to deal with all of that stuff. But he was totally ignoring the other side. He hadn't really given much consideration to what was important to him and what he needed to be doing to align with that thing which was important to him. So he was moving away all the time and he wasn't moving towards. Yeah. And in the work, the coaching work I did with him, we moved in different areas there. And questions like this were asked in the coaching. So you're moving away, you're escaping from the unwanted stuff. You know, you're not going out socially, you're choosing not to because you find it difficult in terms of that difficult stuff you're handling. The question was, has it actually worked then? You know, has it actually worked? And answer, no, it isn't working. It's just a trap I'm into. You know, it wasn't actually doing anything. It wasn't making my life any better by not going out socially, by not joining colleagues in the work in social work stuff. It really wasn't doing anything there. Was that behavior in any way helping you towards some of the stuff that you want to achieve in your life? No, it wasn't in any way whatsoever. Yeah. Have you moving away gotten in the way of doing things that matter, actually doing things that matter? Yes, totally got in the way because I don't do stuff that matters anymore. So I've really forgotten quite a bit about what does matter because I'm hiding away from the feelings of being feeling a bit inadequate socially with my work colleagues. So we were able to use this as a way of just sort of going round. What would you be doing if you're acting in alignment with your values in terms of what you want to try and get out of your life, of this role you've got in this job? What would you be doing? What's some of the behaviors you would be doing? And how can you do some of those things more frequently? And then what would you be willing not to care about, not to feel that way? So just questioning some of those, how important it is to hide away from some of those feelings. Are some of those feelings just things you need to accept in order to work with in the direction of your values? So here it is again, because different presentations speak differently to different people, don't they? So here it is again. I find this very helpful because it's actually almost sort of structures the coaching. Yeah, the key questions are there linked with those key areas, and it's got it, and you can see how it belongs to that underpinning framework. Yeah. One of the things that acceptance and commitment coaching uses a lot of, it's sort of part of its style of working, is to work a lot with metaphors. Yeah, work a lot with metaphors. I'm not going to go through all of the metaphors I've got here. They're on the slides. People can look at them. Before working with the acceptance and commitment model, I hadn't fully appreciated the power of metaphors in working with clients. And my goodness me, I have now. So I've got some favorite metaphors. There are hundreds of, well, not hundreds, but loads and loads of different metaphors. I have some favorite ones, and they're usually ones that I know clients immediately latch on to and make some sort of sense to them. I don't think in the time we've got that they're one I can go through all of the metaphors that they're here, and I'm just sort of positioning them really. The big metaphor around acceptance and commitment coaching is, and I use it a lot, is the passengers on the bus. The client is the bus driver, and their thoughts, feelings, and sensations are the passengers. Sometimes these passengers, negative thoughts and feelings, can be loud and disruptive and can try to direct where the client goes. However, the driver, the client, is ultimately in control and can choose to keep driving in the direction of their values regardless of what the passengers are doing or saying. And if you wanted a crystallization of what acceptance and commitment coaching is about, it's about that. Yeah. It's about being clear. I often say to my clients is being clear that that you're the driver, B, that the engine is on, and C, that you've got a very clear route map. Yeah. And then there will be negative thoughts and feelings. There will be things that get you to question whether you can, whether you're able to, whether you can take that risk, whether you are up to it, and all of those things. And they are the mind. They are the language in the mind. They are the passengers, which can sometimes be very loud and disruptive. But actually, if you've got a solid, clear route and pathway that you want to follow, you can override that. Yeah. And that sounds very easy, but of course, for a lot of clients and a lot of us, it's quite challenging and we need support, and hence the coaching actually does that. So the passengers on the bus is often thought to be the sort of crystallization of the whole process, wrapped up in being very strongly aware of yourself and the present moment. Here's another way of giving you the essence of and the nuggets of the essentials of acceptance and commitment coaching. I'll just let you absorb that. My favorite is the top one. I am not the Incredible Hulk. I am the place where the Incredible Hulk happens. Yeah. Hulk noticing. That's that bit of self as context, isn't it? To try and help those we're working with to get that sense of self as context. Hulk noticing as the feelings of anger and observe them with curiosity. Hulk noticing the tension in Hulk's chest and the cool air on Hulk's skin and the firm ground beneath him. Hulk bringing attention to what matters most to Hulk. Yeah. So if we're working with a client, think of Hulk. If we can get Hulk is very, very psychologically flexible. Yeah. So we're working with a client and we can almost measure in our mind, where is this client in relation to Hulk? Yeah. And what work do we need to do together to help client get to the position of Hulk? There's several resources you can get about acceptance and commitment therapy. This is just the last section of one of them. I haven't put it up there to advocate the workbook, but I've put it up there as an expression of how, if I've worked with a client over a big period of time to do with using the model, how we might at the end, in an absolute ideal world, be saying we've worked and what we've achieved. So with acceptance, we started by learning to accept our thoughts and feelings, particularly the uncomfortable ones, rather than to try and avoid and suppress them. Cognitive effusion, we've learned to step back and observe our thoughts from a distance, recognizing them as mere events of the mind rather than absolute truths. Being present, we've practiced being fully engaged and present in our current experiences, helping us to live more in the moment. Self as context, we've explored the context of the observing self, enable us to differentiate between our thoughts, our feelings, and the constant observing part of ourselves. Values, we've identified our core values, which serve as a compass to guide our actions and decisions. And committed actions. Lastly, we've learned to take actions that are more aligned with our values, making us more fulfilled and satisfied with our lives. Okay. Now, I am not claiming that I've ever worked with a client where I could say, we've done all of that. Yeah. Because goodness me, that's a huge piece of work, and that's almost a sort of, not exactly a lifetime, but it's a long piece of work. But with particular clients, I would hope to be able to say, and hope for them to be able to articulate at the end, perhaps 2 or 3 of those, because that's where we've chosen to work. And that's where we know that the work would be most valuable, because we've done some thinking at the beginning of the sort of gap between them and Hulk. So to repeat a slide that's already been looked at, it's inherently humanistic, compassionate, and optimistic. It's based on the assumption that human beings, each of us has a set of values, a core purpose that can get lost in the swirl of thoughts and feelings and judgments that are an inevitable part of the human experience. And I think that's quite key to help clients to see it's inevitable. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not broken. It's just an inevitable part of the human experience. And yet, even when these thoughts overwhelm us and the feelings are unbearable, it's possible to connect with these values and take action to live a meaningful life. At its best, it's not just effective in terms of behavior change, it can be personally empowering and ennobling. A guy called Christian Hughes has written, sorry, no, he hasn't. That's somebody else. Acceptance and Commitment Coaching. There is a book relatively recently out by a guy called John Hill and Joe Oliver. So if you wanted to pursue more of this, there's a book there. You'll have noticed 1 or 2 of the slides I use have the name Christian Hughes on them. Christian Hughes is a very strong advocate of acceptance and commitment therapy. And you can see a lovely YouTube clip with him saying all that I've just said in his way. And there's the link there. So as a way of actually sort of recapturing this or solidifying it, thinking more about it, there's some resource there for you to do that. And finally, I would be prepared if there were a minimum of 6 people to go deeper on this and really, make it interactive, because this isn't my normal style. This is very presentational and clearly has to be. That's what today is about. We could do a day on this, and in sometime in February if there were 6 people. So if you were interested, there's my email address. Email me and say you'll be interested, and if I get 6 people, we'll negotiate a date and we'll do something about it. More than happy to. So I hope I've given you some of those nuggets to get you to get a sense of what acceptance and commitment therapy is about, and maybe that second one was some joining of the dots between some of this and some of the sort of stuff you do and the way in which you work. Okay.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Something I didn't know much about myself, I must say, but found absolutely fascinating, and how it's all put together. And yeah, so I've written down some wonderful quotes from you and from others, which I'm sure will be very helpful for us as we deepen our tool set. Now, do we have any questions? Because we're lucky on live, at least there's a small group. I mean, those on Facebook and replay don't have the chance to have the man himself here. What questions do you have? Don't be shy. I would say just unmute and ask directly, or write it in the box if you want, or just raise your hand. Yes, go ahead, Kate.
I just wonder, Stephen, if you've got somebody who's really, really stuck, kind of locked into a difficult situation, when they're really, feeling very negative about it. What would your starting point be when it's,
okay.
This is awful, there's nothing I can do, that kind of the worst case scenario, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. For me, one of the keys to all of this, and people, you all know, you do this sort of work, it's helping the client to get that sense of, and I typify it like this, as a lot of people do, which is the thinking self and the observing self. Yeah.
Yeah.
And try and get them to so that they don't see them as one and the same. Now, if they're totally swamped with whatever they're swamped with, it is one and the same, isn't it? Yeah. But to gradually work with them to see that actually they can form anxiety is a very, well, I say a very good one. It's never good, is it? But I often work all the time with anxiety about that. With that, it's to almost use different sort of language, which is not I'm anxious or I'm a very anxious person, I have anxiety, but to actually, again, the language thing. From time to time, I have some very difficult, anxious thoughts. Yeah.
And that's
Getting
the
them to frame
difference,
language. And then you say, well, who is the I then? Oh, yeah, well, the I's not that, is it? No, it can't be. So there's something and just gently get them to see that there is a slight degree of separation between that mind stuff and themselves. Yeah. And that's all. I don't know whether I'm answering this, but that's always my way in. That's always my way in, because some people, I've known people get it in 2 minutes. They go, oh God, of course. Oh. Some people it takes months because they're so washed. Yeah.
And I suppose the thing is, it's because I think nobody can think logically if they're in a fight, flight, freeze state, can they? So to start with, you've got to get your client out of that panic,
yes,
or fury, or so, because I understand it's often
they've got to be in a position to do the work, is what.
Yeah. So you got to
and what I've described is doing the work, not getting them in position to.
Yeah. So you've got to kind of say, yes, this is not an easy situation, to acknowledge that. So it's the acknowledgement and the acceptance first, and then go, okay, let's just
But in other cases, you see, I would hear all the angst and all the difficulty and be, having thoughts and judgments about that. And then saying, with their permission, could we just park that? What I'd like to talk about, what do you really like doing? What do you wish you could do more of that this is getting in the way of? So I'm going to the other side now. So I'm going to values. And what things do you do which are linked with that? What things could you do which are linked with that? Because then that breaks them out of temporarily the other side. Because then you could return to the other side and say, okay, well, there's some stuff here that's getting in the way of that, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's about the stuff getting in the way of something and not just needing to be removed for removal's sake, if you get what I mean. How is it disabling? What's it disabling them from? And sometimes I do that because I'm thinking we're going to get nowhere here, because I can just feel we're going down and down and down and down and down, peeling back the depths of the despair. I can tell you now, rather than say, well, let's just park that for a minute. We'll come back to it. Don't worry. I know you need to say all of that. Let's talk about what you really like doing. Yeah. But sometimes that's a void. Sometimes that is really a void, especially if they've been where they are now for quite a long time, because they've actually forgotten. Have they ever known? But sometimes it's a void, and that's very, very hard.
Yeah.
But then you could try going somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's helpful, but
I remember being asked what I wanted, when I was in complete family zone. And I'm like, what? Am I allowed to want something of my own?
Yeah.
I'm a wife and mother.
Yes.
I was like, does not compute. Yeah. Thank you.
There's another question, Stephen. What are the actual specific differences between ACC and ACT? Right.
Very, very, very important question, isn't it? it depends on where you are in your thinking in terms of where the line is between coaching and counseling. Yeah. And people draw the line differently. Yeah. I would say that acceptance and commitment therapy is where it started, because it started with a therapist and then a group of therapists, as in counseling therapy, trying to find an approach which had a very strong empirical underpinning, a very strong theoretical and even philosophical underpinning. They wanted something that was really, really, and go back to that slide, what do they call it? Transdiagnostic, that covered everything or lots of things. So that's what they came up with. And then the coaching fraternity sort of started to get hold of it. Yeah. So to a degree, there isn't a great deal of difference, really. If you in your coaching are prepared to and do deal with emotional stuff, which is quite hard not to, isn't it, really, if we're honest, then there isn't a great deal of difference. No.
Thank you, Stephen. Colette doesn't have a question, but she was just talking about it. Her comment is it can be repetitive, so negative thoughts on a loop, and so hard to encourage the client out of that negative loop.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's the one about the values, you see, just move. And that's the good thing about the model, because you can see it and you can think, I know where we'll move. We'll just move to this. Let's move to the present, the past, the present, the future. Let's talk about how often during the course of the day the client lives in the present and how that could be increased. And there's some exercises they could do. Yeah. So you can sort of orientate yourself around that model. It provides a good support for the coach, the therapist, the coach, to think about where they could go to try and help the client. And for certain coachees, it can help them orientate themselves as well, to understand where the problem is, that they're just living too much of their time in the past, and reinforcing those negative thoughts all the time.
Great tool for us to have, right? For us to be able to see that and think, okay, let's try this one then. Just to break out ourselves out of our own, okay, how are we going to get them out of here? That helps us also.
Well, that's right. It helps. You can say, well, I'll move here. We'll move here now. We'll talk about what you do what do you do during the course of a week that you would say is actually fully in tune with, fully aligned with those things that you think are really important to you? Yeah, like visiting your mum and dad, or taking the dog, going in the country, walking, cooking, or whatever. What do you do? Yeah. And what do you do which is aligned with those things, all that negative stuff? And let's just have a look at that. Yeah. So you can sort of keep because it all adds up together to create this concept of psychological flexibility. And the theory and the research says the more psychologically flexible we are, the better we are in terms of our psychological well-being. So it's got to be good for us to be helped to be more flexible.
Yeah, quite right. My colleague just mentions how much she loves that model, in particular the Hulk. I know I'm not going to forget the Hulk. I thought the Hulk was great.
Yeah. And I'm very visual. It's like the metaphor. It's very visual. I can sit there with a client and sort of say, right, where are you if the Hulk's 10, where are you in my head? Right, we've got a 2 here, right, we've got a long way to go,
Yeah. Oh, this is very important, that visualization. Any other questions? Anybody else have a question they would like to put to Stephen, either something that he said or something just in general concerning this topic? No? Nothing at all? Any famous last words, Stephen?
No, just entertain it, use it. Don't be hidebound by it, because it's not supposed to be something that's a tram line. They're not tram lines, they're guidelines. And it's a model to be used. It's about psychological flexibility, so we should be using it flexibly to inform us. And just another call to action. If you're interested and I can get 6 people, we can get some real examples going and stuff like that, which hasn't been possible today, but
Perfect.
hey.
Make
Yeah,
sure
we'll
the
have the
office has
Hulk
that
back. We'll
slide.
have the Hulk can come back and we can start with the Hulk.
Yeah, exactly. Steve, if you could just make sure that the office has that slide like that, they can add it in where the replay is going to go, right? So that the people on replay can also see. Oh, of course, they'll see the slides. Sorry, brain's a bit foggy
We'll be
today.
all right there.
Yes,
Right.
we'll be
Know what
all
I had
right
to
there.
do. Don't worry.
Thank you
Don't worry.
very, very much.
Okay, my
thank you
pleasure.
also.
And
So
thank
you,
you,
Stephen,
everybody
for your
that's
time, and thank you everyone for making
on
time
the
to join
call.
here. And good luck applying,
Goodbye.
right? All the best until
Goodbye.
next one. Don't forget your CPC points. Bye.
Bye.